Thank you so much, President Smith. I'm delighted to be here and especially to be introduced by you because you are, as I think you know, such a personal inspiration to me as a leader and also a woman. And congratulations to everybody receiving awards today. Bob, Monica, Kurt in absentia. Emily Ann, welcome to your new post. And Janet, will it's forever? I know it might be appropriate to use a reunion weekend speech to reflect on some aspect of our shared Swarthmore history. But instead, I'd like to use this moment to talk about the subject I've basically been talking about for the 30 years since I left Swarthmore, women and their lives. And more specific to 2018, this current moment of activism for women. Of course, we are women and men in this audience, and thank you, men. The advancement of women is one of the compelling issues of our time, but we as women frequently spend time talking to one another about it, and it's really wonderful, powerful, and I think crucial to be in a mixed audience when we talk about these issues. And this is, after all, a quintessentially Swarthmore issue, since the college was co-founded by the feminist abolitionist preacher Lucretia Mott, who 170 years ago this summer helped organize the first ever women's rights convention in Seneca Falls, New York. Let's give Lucretia Mott a hand. On the morning of my 50th birthday last year, January 21st, 2017, I got up and did what many of you probably did that day as well. I boarded a school bus full of friends and colleagues headed toward Washington, D.C. We were going, of course, to the Women's March. My t-shirt, a gift from my husband, read, "We came down on buses to save our uteruses." As we all know, 5 million women turned out that day on every continent, including Antarctica. And in the astonishingly short 17 months since then, the fire that started in part with the march has blazed through every sector of society. The Me Too movement alone is seismic. 1.7 million women posted personal stories of sexual assault with that hashtag within a single 24-hour period last fall. And power players who once seemed untouchable have been brought to justice. In American politics, a record number of women are running for office and are already winning key primaries. Advertising and media, I'll clap for that any day. Advertising and media have begun creating images that more closely resemble real women in all their gorgeous diversity. Gay, straight, trans, Muslim, black, white, able-bodied, or not. Feminism, for years a philosophy that too many women were wary to identify with publicly, was crowned the Merriam-Webster Word of the Year. All of this is thrilling, but it raises an obvious question. Why now? How can we, what now? Not why now, we know why now. What now? How can we keep this going? And why did it take so long? I realize that's 3 questions, but the key one is, how are we, all of us, women and men who care about equality, going to use this singular moment to make change for ourselves, our daughters, and our sons? We all see these issues through the lens of our personal experience, so let me rewind to tell you a bit about the first feminist in my life, my late mother. If you're here celebrating your 60th college reunion, I see you guys, then you're of her generation. Raised in Brooklyn in the 1940s, she was a rule breaker from day one. My grandparents, immigrants from Morocco and Russia, desperately wanted her to be a concert pianist and had her practice up to 6 hours a day from the age of 3. She entered Juilliard at 16, but she had a rebellious plan of her own, as you might if you'd been forced to practice piano for 6 hours a day. She wanted to study science, and she applied in secret to transfer to Barnard. Her parents were furious, but she went anyway, on scholarship, getting a degree in botany and then a PhD in bacteriology from Harvard, where I recall her class photos showing her as one of just 2 women in a sea of men in suits. By the time I came along, she was one of the few women running a lab at the National Institutes of Health, researching the structure of cell membranes and publishing 50 papers over the course of her career. She was a pioneer, one of her friends recently told me, and she took no shit. At home, her pioneering was lost on me. She was just my goofy, eccentric, buoyantly cheerful, frequently embarrassing mom, whose hair hovered in an absent-minded professor halo of frizz, and who liked to spend dinner time telling me excitedly about lipopolysaccharides and what happened in the centrifuge that day. It is one of the dirty little secrets of my childhood that I would frequently tune out during these conversations and start plotting my outfit for the next day. But what stuck with me was her love of work. My mom was living, breathing proof that pursuing something passionately is one of life's sustaining joys, and that women are as fully equipped for excellence in it as men. The Ms. magazines she subscribed to told me that elsewhere in the world, women were marching for their rights and filing lawsuits against discriminatory employers. Her form of feminism was quieter, but personally powerful. She believed that women could do great things in the lab and in the world, and that people should quit trying to stop them. I inherited that understanding from her. And I inherited her optimism. Albert Einstein famously said that the most important thing each of us must decide for ourselves is whether the universe is a friendly or an unfriendly place. My mother believed the former. Sometimes, cooking dinner and absent-mindedly talking to herself, she'd exclaim, "I love everybody, especially people." I found this excruciating. But her overall positive outlook, the idea that our world is fundamentally good and that it evolves slowly but surely toward progress, became mine as well. And the universe seemed to be evolving from a woman's point of view, as if we, women, were ticking off victories one by one and leaving all the old barriers in the rearview mirror. In my early years in the working world, as first a writer and then an editor of magazines aimed at women, my team and I cheered women on. In 1992, when an unprecedented number of women ran for Congress after the Anita Hill hearings, we called it the Year of the Woman and put it on the cover of Glamour. We fist-pumped for Thelma and Louise as they brought a female point of view to the movies, and then, 10 years later, for Shonda Rhimes as she created show after show with women who were protagonists, not just sidekicks. Women were blasting through all kinds of ceilings. First four-star Army general, first NBA coach, first Speaker of the House, and a personal favorite, the first female door person at New York City's Plaza Hotel. The quote I used most frequently in my editor's letter was playwright Tony Kushner's beautiful line from Angels in America, "The world only spins forward." In 2016, after hearing then-candidate Donald Trump openly mock Gold Star mom Ghazala Khan after she spoke at the Democratic Convention, our team broke with the long-standing policy not to take political sides and made Glamour one of just a few women's publications that fall to endorse Hillary Clinton. I thought of my mom and my stepmother and my grandmothers, immigrants and children of immigrants who prized the American dream, as we made that decision. As my family and I made our way to the Javits Center on November 8th for what we were sure would be Clinton's victory party, my son asked what would happen if Donald Trump won. "He can't win," I said, confident that the candidate's brutal words about everyone from women to people with disabilities would turn off voters of both political parties. "Well, Mom, he can," he pointed out. The realization that my sixth grader had a better grasp of the American mood than me was just the first of many unfortunate discoveries to rattle my faith in progress that year. There was the realization that 63 million Americans were perfectly okay giving a man who'd bragged about sexual assault the most venerated job in the country, arguably the world. There was the realization, as the Me Too charges unfolded later in 2017, that titans of industry I'd thrown parties with were, in their spare time, forcing female colleagues to watch them shower. That TV anchors I'd made pleasant on-air banter with had been harassing and assaulting their young producers. That women had, in some cases, been speaking out for years against the routine abuses of power they were subjected to, but that no reporters had been willing or legally able to report the story out. The line of firsts I'd been celebrating had hidden a Pandora's box of ugliness and misogyny. You know that Gloria Steinem line about how the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off? Last year, for so many of us, was step one. I know how naive it may sound to have been surprised, and it's worth acknowledging that my Black and Latina friends were significantly less startled by all these revelations. That Pandora's box of ugliness in our American dream was old news to them. In a Saturday Night Live episode that aired the weekend after the election, one skit featured a group of friends watching the election results. The women, all white, are shocked. "Oh my God," gasps the actress Cecily Strong, "I think America is racist." A white male partygoer is similarly outraged. "This is the most shameful thing America has ever done," he exclaims, at which point the black actors Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock collapse in uncontrollable hysterics. "Come on, get some rest," Chris Rock says, rolling his eyes. "You've got a big day of moping and writing on Facebook tomorrow." It was against that backdrop that I did some math. Last fall, as I prepared to leave a job I'd had for 16 years as the editor of Glamour, I decided to look back on the time I'd spent there. How, over all those years of cheering women on, had they fared? The results were dismal. Over all those years, and despite all those firsts, Congress had gone from 14% to only 20% female. Last weekend, the New York Times reported that the number of female CEOs running Fortune 500 companies has actually begun falling. As for the pay gap, yes, it's closing, but so slowly that the date by which women around the world will earn the same as their male peers keeps getting pushed back. It's now at 2234, which is roughly around the time our great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughters will be born. In my field, journalism, the number of women in newsrooms has risen only 1% over the last 16 years. And in my mother's field, while the rate of female graduates in the sciences has risen promisingly, only 1 out of every 5 tenured science faculty members across the country are women. For women of color, the figure is an excruciating 1 out of 100. It made my head hurt. The last 10 years have brought us smartphones and cryptocurrency and self-driving cars. Still freaked out about those, but never mind. We as humans know how to get things done. We are clever. We put people on the moon. We combined donuts and croissants to make the world's best ever dessert food. So how was it that my own 15-year-old daughter could be facing the same obstacles my mother did? The world might be spinning forward, but it was spinning ever so slowly. So here we are. Women everywhere are looking at these patterns and saying, not good enough, not fast enough, not fair enough. Our frustration and determination to change things has helped create the current moment of activism. On one level, it feels new and unprecedented. But remember those Year of the Woman headlines from 1992. What will make this moment stick? As a former magazine editor, I love lists. So here, in no particular order, are a few suggestions for women and those who care about them. Number 1, don't mistake the impression of equality for real equality. A few years ago, a fascinating study commissioned by the Gina Davis Institute for Gender in Media, yes, that's Thelma of Thelma and Louise herself, found that the typical crowd scene in a Hollywood movie is only 17% female and has been for the last 70 years, no matter what the film's genre. But wait, here's the weirder part. When surveyed, male filmgoers watching those crowds perceive the gender ratio as 50-50. And if the number of women in the crowd goes up to 33%, male viewers perceive the group as majority female. In other words, when you're used to seeing men, a little female influence can look like a lot. I think the same thing happens on a broader cultural level. When we're used to seeing anything, Congress or the military or our evening newscasts or our Silicon Valley boardrooms, as default setting male, a little female influence can look like a lot. We, all of us, look at the amazing high-profile female success stories that our culture has to offer, Beyonce, Oprah, that lady door person at the plaza, and extrapolate that our woman problem is fixed. We've come a long way, we're good, move along, next issue. But multiple things can be true at once. Oprah exists, but there are still more men named John than there are women overall in major leadership positions in business in this country. This is true. Beyoncé can be the queen of all she surveys, and women musicians can make up only 16% of the pop charts last year. Also true. Consider, a few years ago, the comedians Tina Fey and Amy Poehler hosted the Golden Globes together. Over the course of the evening, almost all the awards went to men. Only one woman, the co-director of Frozen, won an award outside of the actress categories. She shared her prize with her male directing partner. But the next morning, the headline in my hometown tabloid, the New York Post, read, "Too much estrogen." Let's not be distracted. When women are shut out of the prizes everybody came for, there is not too much estrogen in the room. To get to true equity between women and men and fairness for all once marginalized groups, we're going to have to challenge our own knee-jerk assumptions about where we currently are. There's a popular perception in some circles right now that Me Too has gone too far. That, as a male TV anchor whispered to me in the green room before we went on air a few months ago, the pendulum has swung to such an extreme. We've got to get back to normal. I understand the anxiety around these movements. Change can be difficult and painful, and to be clear, fairness and due process for anyone accused are crucial, no exceptions. But the idea that our culture has somehow solved everything already is just incorrect. Take that anchor's own field, journalism. The data there show that 2/3 of women reporters around the world have experienced threats or abuse on the job, usually not from irate subjects of their reporting, but mostly from their own bosses and colleagues. 21% said the violence was physical. Is that really the normal we want to get back to? We can do better, and I believe we will, but not if we call off the charge before we've really gotten going. Number 2, rage is okay. Here's another quick reason people would like Me Too and other movements that are aimed at correcting the abuse of power to be over. They are all about women demonstrating their anger, and angry women make people nervous. This is why best-selling books about women tend to adopt a cheerful tone of self-improvement rather than anger at where we are to begin with. Why their book titles are things like Lean In and not Screw You, Kevin, for taking credit for my work after you interrupted me 12 times in that meeting. Too long for a book title, but I'd buy it. This is why, on a more serious level, our elementary school textbooks have taught that Rosa Parks was just a seamstress who was tired after a long day darning pants, and not a highly self-aware activist who was rightly enraged at her country's inhumane politics. But rage is an appropriate reaction to injustice. It is, of course, not enough. It must be channeled effectively into action, and rage is never an excuse for behaving as despicably as those we are angry at. But sometimes it's called for. The rage many women feel now, as we reevaluate the experiences we took for granted, is healthy. Let's not turn away. Number 3, take a look in the mirror. Another reason we've been stuck at this level of not quite equality is that most of us, well-meaning people, don't believe we're sexist. But the new literature shows that few of us really have our hands clean. We all have our biases. Consider this, from research compiled by the journalist Joanne Lippman. Parents of boys are more likely to Google, "Is my child a genius?" than parents of girls. Funny, but also not funny. Mothers of boys routinely overestimate how fast their sons rather than daughters learned to crawl. On some deep level, in other words, we're more likely to see signs of brilliance in boys than in girls. As we get older, we all show more deference to men. That interrupting thing, one study found that female Supreme Court justices are interrupted 3 times as often as male justices. And get this, the Stanford biologist Ben Barres, who is transgender and worked for decades as Barbara Barres before transitioning at age 42, told Nature magazine that one of the side benefits of now presenting as male rather than female is that, quote, "I can even complete a whole sentence without being interrupted by a man." And because most public leaders have been men, we've come to think of leadership as male. In one recent British experiment reported in the New York Times, respondents said that someone named Eric, who offered new ideas, was a natural leader, while an identical candidate named, you got it, Erica, was not. No wonder that when two women in Silicon Valley were recently starting an art business and finding that potential funders and developers were slow to respond to them, they invented an imaginary third co-founder, a man named Keith. Keith got his emails returned faster, and people were always asking if he needed anything else. Everyone loved Keith. Now, every one of us here would like to think that we would return a real woman's email faster than a fake man's. But again, the truth comes when we look at the numbers. One of my own personal wake-up calls came when at Glamour I commissioned a review of the freelance creators we hired to produce our issues, the photographers, stylists, and other collaborators. To our surprise, only 37% of the photographers featured in the prior year's issues were women, along with 32% of the hairstylists and 49% of makeup artists. At first I was relieved by that 49% till I discovered that the larger the story was, the higher the odds that we had chosen a man. Our numbers were typical for the industry, and the reasons complex. Fashion photography is notoriously male-dominated, celebs sometimes preferred men, but none of those reasons even remotely served as an excuse, and we resolved to change. By the end of that year, we'd made meaningful progress, and the diverse images produced by our new female photographers made a better magazine. But more than that, I'd learned a lesson in humility. We all have biases, and learning to do better is a constant process, whether you're an organization or an individual. The current trendy term woke to describe someone enlightened about these issues implies that either you are or you aren't, that there are wise people who are aware and idiots who are ignorant. The truth is that we are all of us, always learning, or at least we should be. Number 4, women, don't worry so much about being liked. When I was running mostly female businesses, we used to have a rule in meetings. No preceding your ideas, as women so often seemed to do, with, this is probably not a good idea, but, or, I'm sure someone else has already thought of this, but you're just giving your listeners a reason to doubt you. And men, in my experience, rarely did this. They'd enter the room to make a pitch and say, I've got it. Sometimes they did have it. Sometimes they did not. But quite often, their confidence was contagious and effective. Why exactly women do this has been a popular subject of study for a few years now, and it basically boils down to, we don't want to appear arrogant, and we do want to be liked. That's also one reason we tend to apologize more than men. Years ago, I actually bumped into a chair in the middle of the night in my house and said, sorry. The chair forgave me. And why we also use the word just in our emails to give our demands a softer touch, as in, I'm just checking on your project. There's even a well-known app, Just Not Sorry, that will remove those figures of speech from your emails if you want them gone. I have mixed feelings about all of this research. For one thing, we're not crazy in doing this stuff. If we're worried that people will judge us harshly for speaking in the straightforward manner men often favor, I'm checking on your project, Derek. We're often right. Studies show that there's sometimes backlash when women don't seem sufficiently nice. And honestly, if your writing style is peppered with justs and sorries, well, that's your style. Why should we take the guy's way as gospel? Maybe the world would be better with a few more emojis in it. But if you're a woman, it's worth noting these habits and ensuring, at least, that they're intentional. And remember that every time you speak with authority, and without apology, you give women around you permission to do the same. Just mentioning it. Number 5, and this is related, women, expect to get what you deserve. Who here is a millennial? And how often have you heard, oh, millennials, they're so entitled, right? You know the stereotype. They're coddled, they're spoiled, they think everything should come easy, they expect ping pong tables at work and promotions for just showing up, and none of that is good, of course. You do have to work hard to get anywhere in this world, and most people who have gotten anywhere have had to slog through a lot of boring, frustrating, challenging, ping pong table-free days to get there. Mark Twain had it right. If work were so pleasant, the rich would keep it for themselves. But within that context, I have a suggestion. Please be entitled. It will be your salvation. When I was a young mom, I recognized that even though the maternity leave I was getting was far greater than the shoddy national average, it was still, well, kind of insufficient. Unless I was willing to take time off without pay, I'd be back at work in just a few weeks. And so I sucked it up and powered through, finding childcare, stumbling through workdays and business trips sleep-deprived, and once using my Medela breast pump in the bathroom of the Northeast Arkansas Regional Airport, approximately 20 feet from baggage claim A. I complained a lot to my friends and my husband, but I never considered bringing the issue to my company. I felt grateful to have a job. I was aware that as someone who could afford a babysitter, I was already in a position of privilege, and I didn't want to come off as pushy. Flash forward 10 years. A young woman working at the same company, 30 and running a division of 100 people, many of them engineers, starts thinking about this issue. She's not pregnant, but several women on her team are, and to a person, they want more time. She starts a parenting support group at work, complete with its own message boards. Then she rallies her employees to petition the C-suite to change things. Instead of feeling grateful to have jobs, they let the company know that it should be grateful to have them, and they show offer letters from other businesses that promise more leave. And the policy changes to add several weeks more for each parent with pay. It wasn't a handout, says that woman in retrospect. It was a hand that says, we've got you and you've got this. It was a really amazing moment when men and women decided that change needed to happen and made it so. That's entitlement at its best, the knowledge that if something's not right, you deserve to speak up about it for yourself and the people around you. I don't think it's a coincidence that it was a 28-year-old assistant at the Weinstein Company, Lauren O'Connor, who looked around at the bad behavior she saw there 3 years ago and wrote an irate memo to management cataloging everything she saw. Quote, "The balance of power is Harvey Weinstein 10, me 0, she wrote. But still, she took notes and she turned them all in. Her document became a smoking gun that helped reporters Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey build their story last year. If you're young, you're often told, learn to pay your dues. But there are some dues you should never learn to pay. When paying your dues comes at a cost to your dignity or your safety or your child's health, you're entitled to better. Number 6, men. We're all in this together. Last fall, as women started telling their horror stories of workplace abuse, a friend called to tell me her own. In her first weeks in a big new job, she said she'd been repeatedly harassed and on one occasion pushed up against a wall by a male colleague, a man older and more established than she. One night, over dinner, she confided tearfully in her supervisor, also a man. He was sympathetic and shocked. My friend felt comforted. But after that dinner, nothing changed. 2 years passed. She avoided her colleague, but doing so was exhausting. She began hating her otherwise enviable job and looking for a new one. Finally, she went to her boss's boss, desperate, and the whole story broke, including the fact that she'd complained about it to her supervisor 2 years earlier. That supervisor confronted her in puzzlement. "I'm so sorry," he said, "but I didn't know you wanted me to do anything about it." Let's pause there. This is a person responsible for the well-being of his staff. If she had told him that a colleague was stealing from the company or bringing a weapon to work, would he have thrown his hands in the air and said, "I didn't know you wanted me to do anything about it"? Presumably not, and yet sexual misconduct is seen as a personal issue between a man and a woman. The truth is, sexual harassment is not up to women to blow the whistle on, nor is unequal pay, nor is relationship violence. These issues are on all of us to fix, every one of us who cares about personal dignity. There are plenty of bottom line reasons it'll be worth it. If you're running a business, basically every study shows some version of the same truth. Hiring women and then ensuring they can flourish will make your company more successful. Companies that have the most female board members consistently outperform those with the least, by the way. And outside the business world, same thing. Governments with more female members experience less gridlock. Mixed groups of detectives can even solve a murder more accurately than single-sex groups. And on the biggest scale, countries where girls are educated as fully as boys have lower rates of disease, poverty, child marriage, and maternal mortality. Equality isn't just an ideal, It's the simplest way to make our world better. Number 7, our feminism, our new feminism, must be for all. I was recently in a discussion group that included women of all backgrounds and races. The subject turned to women's anger. One white woman said with emotion that all the rage women were feeling was essentially about Trump. It's because of him, she said. He's normalized all of this. A quiet silence fell across the group. Well, he didn't invent these problems, said another woman, who for years has been organizing domestic workers, a group who, like other low-wage workers, are abused at vastly higher rates than almost any other group of women. After the election, she said, with all these women getting mad, I'm just like, welcome. No feminism can succeed if it does not put as much focus on the rights and experiences of domestic workers and farm workers and hotel housekeepers as it does on pop stars in The Future is Female t-shirts. Consider the Women's March. Today, in retrospect, it looks like a success. But back in the weeks before that January day, organizers were repeatedly warned that it might fail. Why? They refused to make it about one issue, as many were advising them to do, to narrow the focus of the march to reproductive rights or sexual assault or equal pay. Instead, they intentionally broadened its focus to include the core concerns of all women, from LGBTQ equality to immigrant rights to racial justice. This turned out to be its strength. This is the feminism that will have staying power. It sounds so obvious to say. You cannot address equal pay without talking in the same breath about the minimum wage, since 2/3 of all positions below that line are held by women, and those job categories are growing. You cannot talk about bodily safety for women without examining racial justice, since women of color experience the highest rates of sexual violence, a fact Tarana Burke, who coined the phrase Me Too, was talking about for 11 years before it became a hashtag. And what could be a more compelling feminist issue than the horrific separation of immigrant families at the border that we've learned about in the news over the last week? For women to play a full role in the life of our country and our world, we must stand up for one another and one another's issues over and over again. And number 8, let's stay optimistic. The future of feminism is going to be up to all of us, women and men. My own understanding of what women's rights are and must be has expanded immeasurably over the last year, and I know I'm still learning. Remember that t-shirt, "We came down on buses to save our uteruses"? I thought it was hilarious when I put it on at 4 in the morning that day, the day of the march, but as I pressed through the crowd with my daughter, the shirt felt entirely insufficient, a glib remnant of another time. We, women, we're not here for our uteruses. We are here for our lives, for other women's lives, for our souls and the souls of our country. I'm still an optimist, but I no longer believe that the world only spins forward, that progress is inevitable, and that the magic hand of the universe will automatically sweep us all toward a world where women and men live and work alongside one another with equal respect for their talents. I desperately want the obstacles my mother faced in pursuing the work she loved to be gone by the time my 15-year-old daughter comes of age. I want her to be free and unencumbered and respected and safe. But none of those things are inevitable, none automatic. They will take rage and listening and humility and organizing and calling one another on our blind spots. They will take standing up for each other, and by the way, not announcing this race over before it's begun. The world will spin forward, but only if we push. Thank you.